You think your money is growing at 4.5%, like it's quietly doing its job in the background while you go about your life. You wake up, go to work, maybe grab coffee on the way, and somewhere in the back of your mind, there's this small sense of comfort. At least my money is doing something. But here's the part. No one really sits you down and explains. Your money isn't actually working for you the way you think it is. It's being used. Right now, the system is taking what you saved, the hours you worked for, the discipline it took not to spend, and it's moving it somewhere else, into deals you'll never see, loans you'll never hear about, profits that are 5, 10 times larger than anything that will ever show up on your screen. And you don't feel it, because everything about it feels right. It feels safe, it feels responsible, it feels like you're finally doing what you're supposed to do. But the reality is, you're not earning interest. You're providing liquidity. You're not really inside the game the way you imagine it. You're more like the piece that keeps the game running. The system needs you, but not in the way you think. And once that clicks, even just a little bit, it sticks with you. It's hard to go back to seeing your money the same way again. So now the question changes. It's not, how much have you saved? It's, if this is true, then what level have you actually been playing at this whole time? And if you want to really understand what's going on underneath all of this, not the surface level advice, but how money actually moves, then you should probably subscribe now. Because what you're about to see, it doesn't just change how you invest. It changes how you look at every dollar you've ever earned. You've been doing what you were told. Work hard. Be responsible. Save a portion of your income. Move it somewhere safe. Maybe you set up a high-yield savings account. Maybe you took that extra step and opened an investment account, bought an index fund, started a retirement plan. From the outside, it all looks right. If someone looked at your finances on paper, they'd probably say you're disciplined, you're consistent, you're making progress. But if you're honest with yourself, it doesn't feel like progress. Not really. You check your balance after months, maybe even years of doing everything correctly, and the number has moved, sure, but not in a way that matches the effort. It feels small. It feels disconnected, like you've been pushing, but the result barely responds. You expected something more noticeable, something that makes you feel like you're actually getting ahead. And that quiet frustration, that subtle feeling that something isn't adding up, that's where most people stop. Or worse, they ignore it. Because the truth is, that number you're staring at, that slow growth, that underwhelming return, that was never the point. It's not that the system isn't working. It's working exactly the way it was designed to. You're just only seeing the part of it that you're allowed to see. And this is where things start to shift. Because compound interest, the thing everyone talks about like it's one simple concept, it isn't one experience. It's a ladder. Different levels, different rules, different outcomes. At one level, your money grows slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, like background noise you stop noticing. At another, it starts to pick up speed. It moves in a way that feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable at first. And then there are levels above that, levels where the entire structure changes, where you start hearing about things that were never mentioned before. Private deals, tax strategies that don't just reduce what you owe, but reshape how your money flows entirely. Systems designed not just to grow wealth, but to protect it, multiply it, and pass it forward across decades. And the uncomfortable part is this. The difference between those levels? It's not how hard you work. It's not how smart you are. It's where you stand, your position, your access. Which means that frustration you've been carrying around, that feeling that you're doing everything right but still not getting anywhere meaningful, it's not because you're failing. It's because you've been playing at a level that was never meant to feel like enough. And almost everyone starts at the same place. A level that feels stable. A level that feels safe. A level where you don't even realize you're stuck. Level 1, the illusion saver. At the beginning, everything feels under control. You earn money. You spend what you need. And whatever's left, you set aside. Maybe it's automatic. Maybe you do it manually every month. Either way, it builds. Slowly, quietly, consistently, and that alone gives you a sense of relief. You look at the number and think, at least it's growing. At least I'm not falling behind. And for a while, that feeling is enough. It feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels like you're finally doing what adults are supposed to do. But there's something you don't see. The money doesn't just sit there. It moves. The moment it leaves your hands, it becomes part of something else. It gets deployed, leveraged, multiplied in ways you're not involved in, and don't benefit from the same way. And the more you pay attention, the harder it is to ignore. Yes, it's growing, but it's small, controlled, almost capped, just enough to keep you comfortable, not enough to actually change your trajectory. And that's when something subtle starts to shift. You don't panic, you don't quit, you just question it. Because deep down, you start to feel the difference. Saving protects you, but it doesn't move you. And once you feel that, even slightly, you don't stay here forever. That's the moment you start looking for something else. That's when you step into the next level. Level 2 activation, early investor. You don't go all in. You don't suddenly become aggressive or take huge risks. You just start. A small amount, something you can afford to experiment with. Maybe you set it up to run automatically, so you don't have to think about it every time. Every month, it moves, quietly, and at first, it doesn't feel that different. The numbers still don't jump in a way that excites you. It's not dramatic, it's not fast, it's not something you brag about, but something is changing underneath the surface. You're no longer just storing money. You're directing it. You're giving it a job. And more importantly, you're introducing it to time. Because that's what this really is. It looks like you're trying to make money, but what you're actually doing is buying time. Every dollar you invest becomes a piece of time that keeps working, even when you're not paying attention. It doesn't stop when you go to sleep. It doesn't slow down when you get distracted. It just continues, quietly building on itself. And the longer you leave it alone, the more it compounds. At first, it's subtle, easy to ignore, almost boring. But then, something changes in the way you think. You stop asking, how much did I make this month? And you start asking, what happens if I just don't touch this at all? That question is different. It's deeper, but you still don't fully understand what you've started. Because the system only reveals itself completely when it's under pressure, when things go wrong. And that moment always comes. Level 3, the test, drawdown. It never announces itself. There's no warning, no clear signal that says, this is the moment that matters. At first, everything looks normal, the same routine, the same quiet progress. You check your account out of habit, not concern. And then, something shifts. The numbers dip, not dramatically, not enough to panic right away, just enough to make you pause for a second longer than usual. You refresh. It drops again. Now it's noticeable. Now it feels real. You start doing the math without even trying. How much was there last week? How long it took to build? How quickly it's shrinking now? Your chest tightens, just slightly. Your breathing changes. Your thoughts start moving faster than they should. You open the app again, even though you just checked it. You scroll, you look at the chart, you search for reassurance that isn't there. And then your hand moves, almost automatically, toward the one button that would end the discomfort. Sell. Lock it in. Stop the loss before it gets worse. And in that moment, it feels logical. It feels smart. It feels like you're taking control. But something interrupts you. Not confidence. Not certainty. Just hesitation. A small pause. You put the phone down. You don't decide anything. You just wait. Minutes pass. Then hours. Then days. The market doesn't bounce back right away. It doesn't comfort you. It doesn't reward your patience immediately. It just moves. Up, down, sideways. Indifferent to how you feel. And you sit with it. Uncomfortable. Uncertain. Quietly resisting the urge to act. And that's when it happens. Not on the screen, but inside you. You realize this was never about picking the perfect investment. It was about whether you could stay when everything in you wanted to leave. Because discipline, not intelligence, is what allows compounding to continue. Anyone can start. Very few can stay. And if you make it through that moment, if you don't interrupt what you've built, then something deeper begins to unfold. Something less obvious. Something more dangerous. Level 4, the acceleration. Understanding. At some point, curiosity takes over. You're no longer reacting. You're trying to understand. So, you run the numbers. Nothing complicated. Just a simple projection. A fixed monthly investment. A reasonable return. A long stretch of time. You type it in. Hit calculate. And then, you just stare at the result. It doesn't feel right. It's too big. Too far removed from what you're putting in. You assume it's wrong. So you run it again. Adjust the numbers, lower the return, change the timeline. But the outcome doesn't change in any meaningful way. It still grows, still expands, still reaches a number that doesn't feel proportional. And that's when it clicks. This was never linear. It only felt that way in the beginning. Those early years, they were slow, quiet, almost discouraging. But they weren't the full picture. They were the setup. Because what comes later doesn't grow. It accelerates. Growth stacking on growth, building momentum in a way that doesn't feel natural at first. And the strangest part? The bigger it gets, the less it depends on what you do next. That's when the shift happens. You stop seeing money as something you earn, and start seeing it as something that multiplies with or without your constant input. But even here, even with this understanding, you're still not seeing the full system. Because this still isn't where the rules change. Level 5. The wall. Access barrier. You don't notice it immediately. It shows up in small moments. A conversation you overhear. An article you read. Someone mentioning an investment you've never seen before. At first, you assume you just need to learn more. But then you look deeper. And you realize you can't access it. Not because you don't understand it. Not because you're not capable. But because you don't meet a requirement, a number, a threshold, something that has nothing to do with effort or discipline or intelligence. And that realization hits differently. Because for the first time, you see a door that doesn't open for you. Not yet. And beyond that door, there's a different layer of the system. Quiet, unadvertised, not explained. Just there, operating above where you are. And it changes something in the way you think. Because now you understand. Growth alone isn't the goal. Access is. Because capital doesn't just increase what you have. It changes what you're allowed to participate in. Which conversations you're part of. Which opportunities you even hear about. Which rooms you're invited into without asking. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You realize there's a version of the game being played above you, with completely different rules. And the moment you cross that threshold, everything changes. Level 6, the shift, capital system. The structure expands. What used to feel simple no longer applies. You're not choosing between basic investments anymore. You're allocating across systems, public markets, private markets, structured deals, layered strategies, some focused on growth, some on income, some designed purely for efficiency. And for the first time, you see how money can operate in multiple directions at once, generating returns in one place, reducing tax exposure in another, preserving capital somewhere else entirely. It's no longer about a single account. It's a network. Every decision connects to another. Every move has a second-order effect. And when it works, it feels powerful. Because now you're not just participating. You're designing. You begin to understand things that never made sense before. Why certain opportunities require long lockups. Why illiquidity is rewarded, not avoided. Why structure sometimes matters more than performance. And more importantly, you see how the system rewards those who can navigate it. This isn't about finding the next big win. It's about positioning capital so that it works across multiple layers at the same time. And when that clicks, something shifts inside you. Money stops feeling like something you manage and starts feeling like something you deploy. But even here, even with all this control, something feels different. Because the peak isn't what you expected it to be. Level 7, the cost, invisible trade-offs. At some point, things slow down. Not because they have to, but because you start noticing something you weren't looking for. The cost, not financial. That part is clear, measurable, trackable. But everything else? That's harder to see. The time it took. The decisions you made when no one was watching. The moments where you chose discipline instead of comfort. Where you said no when it would have been easier to say yes. The relationships that shifted, slowly, over time. Not because anything broke, but because you changed. The way you think, the way you prioritize, the way you see the world, and how that created distance between you and people who don't see it the same way. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment. It accumulated, quietly, just like everything else. And now, when you look back, you can see it clearly. Wealth didn't just build your life. It reshaped it in ways you didn't fully understand while it was happening. And that realization isn't negative, but it isn't simple either, because you start to understand something deeper. Every level gives you something, and every level takes something with it. And that's when you pause, not to stop, but to look back at where all of this really began. And this is the part most people never truly see. Compound interest was never just a tool to grow money. It was always a system, quietly, consistently, shaping where you end up. At the lower levels, it feels slow, almost insignificant, just enough to keep you patient, but not enough to move you forward in any meaningful way. But at higher levels, with the right access, the right structure, the right positioning, that same mechanism begins to accelerate in ways that most people will never experience. And that's the shift. The system isn't broken. It was never meant to work the same way for everyone. The returns you see, the opportunities you can access, the efficiency of how your money grows, all of it depends on where you stand. Which means, this entire time, it was working exactly as intended, just not for you. And once that fully sinks in, the journey looks completely different. Because now you understand, this was never about chasing returns. It was about reaching a position where the system starts working in your favor. And the unsettling part? It all begins with something so small, you almost ignore it. Somewhere right now, someone is just starting. They open their first account, set aside a small amount, maybe $100, maybe $200. It doesn't feel significant. It doesn't feel like it could change anything. But that's where almost everyone gets it wrong. Because it was never about the amount. It was about the mechanism. That quiet decision, repeated over time, starts building something far bigger than money. It shapes your position, your access, the system you eventually get to operate inside. And along the way, it changes you, how you think, what you value, what you're willing to trade, and what you're not. So the real question isn't just how much you'll make. It's who you'll become. Because compound interest doesn't just build wealth. It quietly decides where you stand in the financial system. If you see yourself somewhere in this journey, comment below and tell me what level you're at. And if you want to understand how this system really works beneath the surface, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.